They said I married him for money. His mother made sure everyone believed it. When he threw me out based on her lies, I lost everything: my marriage, my dignity, my home. But what they didn't know, I was the one holding his empire together, and when I let go, it all came crashing down. Before I tell you how I went from penthouse to homeless shelter and back to the top, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Because this story about betrayal, lies, and ultimate redemption will have you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Nicole, and 15 years ago, I was a pattern maker from Detroit working in New York's garment district. I had magic in my fingers. I could look at fabric and see possibility. I could sketch a design and know exactly how it would drape on a body. But I was invisible. Just another black woman hunched over a cutting table in a cramped workshop, making $12 an hour and dreaming of something bigger. That's when I met Thomas Bradford. He just inherited his father's failing textile warehouse in Brooklyn, and he was drowning. The man had an MBA from Cornell, but didn't know the first thing about fashion or fabric. He came into the workshop where I worked, looking for someone who could help him understand what he'd inherited. My boss pointed at me and said, "Nicole knows textiles better than anyone here." Thomas offered me a coffee. I gave him a business plan instead. I laid it all out on a napkin at that coffee shop. Sustainable luxury fashion. That was the future. His warehouse was full of dead stock fabric that high-end brands had rejected. I could see what it could become. I told him about the contacts I'd built over 8 years in the industry, the small manufacturers who did quality work, the gap in the market for luxury clothing that didn't destroy the planet. He listened to every word, and when I finished, he said, "When can you start?" I should have asked for a title. I should have demanded my name on the company. But I was 28 years old, tired of being broke, and he was offering me $40,000 a year to do what I loved. So I said yes. Within 3 years, we'd built Bradford Luxury into a $50 million company. Within 7, we were worth $500 million, and somewhere in between the late nights and the fashion shows and the champagne celebrations, Thomas and I fell in love. Or at least, I thought we did. He proposed at our 10th anniversary gala, got down on one knee in front of investors, press, everyone. I said yes because I loved him, yes, but also because I'd built this with him. I thought we were partners. I thought he saw me. His mother, Patricia Bradford, wore black to our wedding. Not navy, not charcoal, funeral black. She sat in the front row with her mouth pressed into a thin line while her son married a woman from Detroit with no pedigree, no trust fund, and skin darker than she could pretend not to notice. After the ceremony, she pulled Thomas aside, and I heard her whisper, "You could have had anyone." But I tried. God, I tried to win her over. I invited her to lunch, sent her flowers, asked her opinion on things, even though I knew she'd criticize. For 5 years of marriage, I bent myself into shapes trying to earn her approval. Thomas always told me to ignore her, to keep the peace, which really meant let my mother disrespect you without defending you. Here's what nobody knew, though. While Thomas was the face of Bradford Luxury, shaking hands and doing interviews and playing golf with investors, I was the architect. Every collection, every design, every strategic decision came from me. I created the signature aesthetic that made us famous. I built the relationships with sustainable fabric suppliers across Europe and Asia. When we nearly went bankrupt during the 2020 pandemic, it was my pivoting strategy that saved us. I'd developed the direct-to-consumer model and the virtual fashion show concept that kept us alive. But Thomas's name was on the company. His face was in Forbes and GQ, and I was fine with that at first. I didn't need the spotlight. I just wanted to create, to build, to make beautiful things. I thought our marriage meant we were building together, that my contributions mattered even if they were invisible to the world. I was so naive. Around our 13th anniversary, I started noticing changes. Thomas began making decisions without consulting me, hiring a new marketing director I'd never met, changing suppliers I'd spent years vetting. When I questioned him, he'd say, "I've got this," or "You worry too much." His mother was around more often, sitting in his office, whispering in his ear, and he started introducing me differently at events, not as his partner, not as the co-creator of our brand, just my wife, Nicole. Then came Brittany Chen, 24 years old, Instagram famous, with 1 million followers who watched her post-outfit videos. Thomas hired her as the new face of our spring campaign, and suddenly, she was everywhere. In our offices, at our meetings, sitting next to Thomas at company dinners. Patricia loved her, absolutely adored her. I'd catch them having lunch together, my mother-in-law and this girl who was young enough to be her granddaughter. I knew what was happening. I'm not stupid. I saw the way Thomas looked at her, the way he laughed too loud at her jokes, the way his phone was suddenly password protected. I hired a private investigator, and within 2 weeks, I had photos of them leaving hotels together. I had text messages. I had everything. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because I'd started to notice something else. Thomas was beginning to believe his own mythology. He genuinely thought he'd built Bradford Luxury alone. When reporters asked about his success, he talked about his vision and his instincts. He never mentioned me. Not once. And I realized that in his mind, I really had become just the wife who helps out. So I started documenting everything. Every design sketch with my signature and date, every email where I'd made strategic decisions, every contract I'd personally negotiated. I backed up 15 years of work onto hard drives and stored them at my best friend Angela's house. I copied my entire digital archive, thousands of designs, all created by me. All legally mine as the original artist. I made lists of every supplier contact, every manufacturer relationship, every single thing I'd built that made Bradford Luxury successful. And then I waited. The explosion came on a Tuesday night at Patricia's house. Thomas had insisted we have dinner there, which was unusual. When we arrived, Patricia had printed out photos spread across her dining room table. Photos of me sitting in a cafe with Lawrence Hayes, the CEO of our biggest competitor, Meridian Fashion Group. "Explain this," Thomas said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. I looked at the photos. They were real. I had met with Lawrence 3 times over the past month. "You've been selling our designs to the competition," Patricia said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I hired an investigator. You've been meeting with him in secret, planning to destroy everything my son built." "That's not," I started, but Thomas cut me off. "Don't lie to me, Nicole. The evidence is right here. My mother saw you. She has proof of the meetings. What were you doing with Lawrence Hayes if not betraying me?" "Here's the truth. Lawrence Hayes had been trying to steal our patents. He'd been creating knockoffs of our designs and selling them through his company. I'd been meeting with him to gather evidence for a lawsuit, working with our legal team to protect everything we'd built. I had emails from our lawyers. I had documentation of the entire strategy. But Thomas didn't ask to see any of that. He didn't ask for my side of the story. He just believed his mother. After 15 years together, after building an empire side by side, he looked at me and chose to believe I was a thief. "Get out," he said. "Get out of my mother's house and get out of my life." I left that night with just my purse. Thomas filed for divorce the next morning. By that afternoon, I was locked out of our penthouse, locked out of my office, locked out of every bank account. Security escorted me from the building like I was a criminal. People I'd worked with for a decade wouldn't meet my eyes. The prenup I'd signed when we married gave me almost nothing. Thomas's lawyers had written it to protect his family business, even though I'd built that business. I got $100,000 and 30 days to find somewhere to live. That was it. 15 years of my life. 15 years of my work, reduced to a check that wouldn't even buy a decent car. I stayed with Angela for the first week. Then I found a tiny studio apartment in Queens, the kind of place I'd lived in when I first moved to New York. I was 43 years old, starting over with nothing. I couldn't work in fashion. The industry believed I was a thief and a traitor. Thomas had made sure everyone knew his version of events. Companies I'd spent years building relationships with wouldn't return my calls. I spent 2 months in that apartment, barely leaving, barely eating. I'd built something beautiful, and I'd let someone else put their name on it. I'd made myself invisible, and now I was erased. But Angela wouldn't let me disappear. She's a lawyer, sharp as a knife, and she'd been telling me for years to protect myself. She came over one night with Chinese takeout and her laptop. "Stop feeling sorry for yourself," she said. "You've got documentation of everything, right? Every design, every decision, every contribution you made?" I nodded. "Then stop hiding. It's time to build your own empire." She helped me start the legal groundwork. We filed paperwork to establish my own company, Nicole Harris Designs. I used my maiden name deliberately. I wasn't Bradford's wife anymore. I was myself, and I had 15 years of designs that were legally mine, created by my hand, protected under intellectual property law. But I didn't launch right away. First, I needed to watch what would happen to Bradford Luxury without me. It took 3 months for the cracks to show. The fall collection Thomas launched was a disaster. The designs were derivative and cheap-looking. Brittany had apparently been given a role as creative consultant, and her Instagram aesthetic didn't translate to luxury fashion. Reviews were brutal. Vogue called it a disappointing departure from Bradford's signature sophistication. But that was just the surface. The real problems were deeper. The sustainable fabric suppliers I'd spent years cultivating started raising their prices or refusing to work with Bradford Luxury altogether. See, those relationships were built on personal trust, my personal trust. Without me maintaining them, they evaporated. Quality control fell apart because I'd been the one managing the factory relationships, visiting production facilities, ensuring ethical labor practices. Within 6 months, Bradford Luxury was facing labor violation allegations at their manufacturing plants. The major department stores started dropping the brand. Our sustainability certifications lapsed because I'd been the one managing all that paperwork, understanding all those requirements. Thomas had no idea how much invisible work I'd been doing. Meanwhile, I quietly launched my consulting firm. Nothing flashy. I reached out to former employees, the ones who'd actually worked with me, who knew the truth about who'd built Bradford Luxury. One by one, they left Thomas's company to work with me. The talented designers, the skilled pattern makers, the people who actually created the clothes, they all knew. I helped other fashion brands develop sustainable practices. I consulted on design. I used every contact I'd ever made, every relationship I'd built, and I did it all under my own name. Thomas's company continued its death spiral. The stock dropped 70% in 8 months. Investors were furious. I heard through the grapevine that he was panicking, that he'd tried to recreate my processes and failed. He didn't understand the work I'd done because he'd never actually done it himself. Then came the call I'd been expecting. Thomas begging me to come back, offering me a stake in the company, a position, anything I wanted. He admitted it. Finally admitted that I'd been instrumental to their success. Not the architect, not the creator, just instrumental. I said no. "Nicole, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I made a mistake." "My mother. She lied about the meetings. I know that now. Lawrence Hayes admitted you were building a case against him. You were protecting us. You chose to believe I'd betray you," I said quietly. "After 15 years, you chose to believe the worst of me without even asking for my side. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage really was." "I'll make it right," he promised. "I'll give you credit. I'll tell everyone. I don't need you to give me credit anymore, Thomas. I'm building my own legacy now." I hung up. 2 months later, I launched my own fashion brand. Nicole Harris Collection, luxury sustainable fashion, every piece designed by me, every detail perfect. I put my face on it this time. I did the interviews. I told my story, the whole story, about being the invisible architect behind Bradford Luxury, about being erased from my own success. The response was overwhelming. Industry insiders had always suspected the truth. They confirmed it publicly. Former employees went on record about my role. My first collection sold out in 3 days. Major retailers fought to carry my brand. I was on the cover of Elle, Essence, and Business Insider. Thomas's lawyers tried to sue me for breach of non-compete and intellectual property theft. That was their biggest mistake. Because in court, I produced every piece of evidence I'd collected over 15 years, every design sketch with my signature, every email proving strategic decisions came from me, every contract I'd negotiated, every single thing I'd documented. The court case became public record. The whole world got to see that Thomas Bradford had built his fortune on his wife's uncredited work, that he'd taken credit for designs she'd created, that he'd erased her contributions for over a decade. I didn't just win the case. I won $400 million in damages for intellectual property theft, unpaid wages, and fraud. I won the rights to use any designs I'd created during our marriage. I won everything. Bradford Luxury declared bankruptcy within 18 months of our divorce. Thomas lost the company, his reputation, his fortune, everything. Brittany left him the moment the money dried up. His mother's health deteriorated rapidly, the stress and guilt eating away at her. Last I heard, Thomas was working a mid-level job at a retail chain, living in a rental apartment, drowning in debt. People ask me if I feel bad about it, if I feel guilty for not saving his company when I could have. The answer is no. I didn't destroy Bradford Luxury. I just stopped building it. There's a difference. Today, Nicole Harris Collection is worth over $1 billion. I have 300 employees. We manufacture in facilities I've personally vetted, paying fair wages and maintaining environmental standards. I've won awards for design and for ethical business practices. My face is on magazine covers, my name is known. But the real victory isn't the money or the recognition. It's that I'm visible now. For years, I let someone else take credit for my work because I thought the creation mattered more than the credit. I thought being humble and invisible was noble. I was wrong. Your name on your work matters. Your face on your success matters. Being seen for who you are and what you've built matters. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. Thomas didn't destroy me with his mother's lies and his betrayal. He freed me from invisibility. He gave me permission to finally step into my own light and claim what was always mine. So that's my story. They tried to erase me, and instead I became unforgettable. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been the invisible force behind someone else's success, do me a favor. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe if you love stories about women who refuse to stay hidden. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever let someone take credit for your work? What would you do differently now? Share this video with every woman who's tired of being the ghost in someone else's story. Your turn to be seen is coming. I promise. Until next time, this is Nicole, reminding you to put your name on your work and your face on your success.